Call the roll. Mr. Brannon?
Present.
Mr. Burgess?
Yeah, Dr.
Miss
Foreman.
Ms. Gleaton?
Present.
Ms. Herbert? Ms. Mood?
Here.
Ms. Racio? I'll call the advisory. Skip Mr. Jenkins, Mr. Coon, and Ms. Robinson.
All right. Next item of business is adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any additions or changes to the agenda? If not, we'll get a roll call on adoption of the agenda.
Okay, Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Burgess, Ms. Gleaton,
Present.
Ms. Herbert, Ms. Mood,
Yes.
Ms. Racio,
Passed
and it's
and
adopted.
adopted. All right. So we'll go next into the Midlands Transit Riders Association update. I see Mr. Thurston with us. Say, Walter.
Hey, thank you, Lil. I wanted to say something if Mr. Burgess was there, but I guess he's not, so I'll have to hold off on it. But other than that, I was on bus 88 on Monday, and the driver who, with the comment for a pretty long time, she had no idea why there were shelters at Lucius Road. So may I suggest to RAPDEV that they communicate at least with the drivers as to what the shelters are all about on at the super stop. And that's all I got. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So that takes us to number 4, adoption of the minutes. Is there a motion to adopt?
I move.
And a
I
second?
second it.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor? We'll go, I guess, call the roll.
Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Burgess, Ms. Gleaton,
Yes.
Ms. Herbert,
Yes.
Ms. Mood,
Yes,
Mr. Racio.
thanks. And the minutes are adopted. And glad to have you with us.
Yes. Sorry, it took me a minute.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the discussion and action items. Have Mr. McGee with us from the past. Yeah, there he is. Zach, you go ahead and give us your report.
Yes, good afternoon. In the past couple of months, we've continued to coordinate with the Comet, both Eric and Jackie on work to be completed. And at the moment, we have about 3 or 4 stops that we're working on that require easements from property owners to move forward with. And in the past month, we also provided one stop to AOS to move forward with construction.
Okay, and just for my own clarification, we've looked to be sure that none of the stops that you're working on have any sort of conflicts with changes in the phase 1. So
That's correct. I think a few months ago, we provided the list to Eric and Blake, and they came back and said that everything we're working on at the moment is not in conflict.
okay. So we still have a pretty long list in design for sure. All right. Any other questions or comments for Mr. McGee? Okay, then we'll accept that report as information and thank you for bringing it. And that takes us to the discussion of the Lucius and River Super Stop update. Roy, you gonna start us with that?
Yes. Oh, Eric, you want to start?
Yeah. So for what it's worth, we actually had our
our kickoff meeting for our public outreach period last week. I think it was pretty successful. We did receive a lot of feedback. I know Walter Durst, he was in attendance, and we had a few other people as well that were familiar to me. But we had a lot of people that just provided different types of feedback, and we were able to answer most of those questions. And to this day, I'm still getting a few emails that I've been responding to address, what the path forward looks like. But as we are assessing the one thing that I did mention in the presentation is that the timeline that we have is the most aggressive approach that we have, which is starting in implemented phase 1 for September 1. And as of today, we do have a little concern about that implementation date. And it's not because of the reasons that we've mentioned before, which was because the number of buses or the number of operators we would have available, or even just the amount of time that we have. I think we are moving at a good pace. The issue right now is that because we're looking at the quality of the concrete, just QA/QC, quality assurance, just making sure that it is operable. And the way I explained it in the presentation is that for any project, normally if there was a vertical project, we will receive a certificate of occupancy, just allowing us to be able to utilize the facility. But in this case, we don't necessarily need that. So it takes a little time for us to be able to see the quality of the, and our ability to actually occupy the space. And we started to see there were some cracks in the concrete and things of that nature that we wanted to go ahead and address. And we've been meeting internally frequently about this. We met with the contractor as well and trying to get some stuff rectified. They have provided us a timeline of when that would be completed. And as of today, that date is August 21st. Is when they feel like they would be able to complete any changes that are necessary in order for us to occupy the space. And because of that date, it is my recommendation to the service committee that we move the implementation of the phase 1 of the project to January, just to ensure that even after that date, we do give them, we give it enough time to just review that space and ensure that we'll be good to move forward. But as of today, that is where we are, and we just want to make sure we pay close attention to what's going on at that site.
Does anyone have questions for Derek? Well, I do, because this is a brand new snag, and I was completely unexpected to hear this. So what happens in terms of the contract when you have something that's built and then find that it's not durable?
So
What recourse do we have?
So currently, there's still room in the contract for them to resolve the problem. So technically on paper, it is considered 100% financially complete and also 100% physically complete. But if there's any issues with the quality of the construction, we do have the leverage to be able to have them to fix the issues at this point in time.
Well, I'm sure you understand what's a basic concern to me is that we had to go through so much to be sure that the stability of the land underneath was okay, and for cracks to appear this soon. I mean, what I'm worried about is that this is not a matter of patching concrete, that this may be a matter of the underlying stability of the ground.
And
Yeah.
Eric, I can speak to that because again, that's our concern, even when we had the issues, when we had to, with the dirt issue that we dealt with. And that's why staff constantly visited the site, based on where the project was. And when the project was pretty much what they considered 100% complete, even though everything was not signed off on. In staff visit over there, we noticed other issues, which is why we have been meeting with the contractor. Also, if you back up, we also have a project manager, which is Brownstone, and they're overseeing that, which we work with them in coordinating a meeting that we could meet and bring up all the issues that we saw there. And we gave them a timeline to come up to identify those things also, but also come up with a timeline of how are you going to address these and how they're going to be fixed. And based on those things or that timeline, they got that back to us. We met again yesterday to see where they were on the list. You know, the biggest concern, and this was brought forward before, we have an issue with the entrance, which through Brownstone and also with the engineering firm Davis and Floyd and working with SCDOT, they feel like they do have a solution for that. And that part of the project is scheduled hopefully to be completed by the end of this month.
And that was the matter of it being too sharp a turn for the.
Or as they enter, basically going from Lucius to the park into the stop, I think they determined based on the bus that it drug, I think on the front, I think Jackie, as they were going in. So that's when they identified that they had an issue there. And luckily we identified that when we had the rodeo. So they've been addressing that and they've come up with a solution, and that part of the project should be taking place and be completed within a couple weeks.
All right, so in layman's terms, can you tell me what that solution is? I mean, tell.
Well, basically, looking at that and, you know, what I've seen, the parking lot, I guess it is supposed to be graded to a certain level,
Yeah,
and it gets
sounds like
specific,
great.
and it has to meet certain DOT codes. So that was identified through our engineering firm and SCDOT with the solution that they came up with of Lucius and the super stop, what has to be added or graded down to meet those guidelines. So, you know, that's probably just my general understanding, not being the engineer and going through that. But we did talk with Davis and Floyd, and they also gave their feedback, and they sent us basically, you know, a diagram of what it looks like or how many inches they have to go down, but still be safe for entrance and everything. So we had those type of discussions, and, you know, that's when we have to rely on them to give us the information that we need and also to make sure that they're meeting all the guidelines or SCDOT guidelines that they need to.
All right, so what I'm understanding is that because Brownstone is the project manager,
Right.
that all of these issues, the underlying stability of the ground, the grading for the buses to enter, the cracking in the concrete, all of those issues come within the scope of the project manager's oversight.
Right.
Correct.
Will?
Mr. Chance, let me ask you some questions, and Eric as well. So for this project, where is the disconnect between Davis and Floyd, who I think has a track record of civil design based off of DOT standards? Was the disconnect between their drawing being correct and the contractor just not performing to the design? I guess that's one question. If that's not clear right now, that's something to consider.
I could actually, I can start. So I think Davis and Floyd did a very good job with designing it out. We didn't find many issues with the site plan. In this case, I think it more so falls on the construction side. And of course, throughout, and it's kind of hard to really say who to point the finger at. But in this case, there may be some issues with water, underlying water, that no one was able to identify or just decided to overlook and felt like maybe this would be okay. And we feel like through that process, maybe some steps that could have been taken were not taken. And because that concrete was laid down on top of that space, that's also the same areas that we're seeing majority of the cracking.
So have we held back payment?
Yeah, go ahead. Eric.
What percentage?
And I'll address this way. Yes, there's a retainer. For example, basically it's about 10%. And what that means is with Brownstone being the project manager, there's a certain, the 10% that they do, the retainer, until the project is completed according to the scope of work. But also too, with the contractor, there was a subcontractor for the concrete work. And the contractor also has a retainer on that subcontractor.
Okay.
Okay, so that's in
That's
place where,
important. That's important.
okay, yes, because that's important too, for them to get that, then the project has to be completed according to the scope of work and for sign off.
Well, and if a third party needs to come in and test what they've done, there's always the bonding, the insurance. If that contractor did not perform, we need to call on their insurance to come back and perform correctly. Because you're right, the buses aren't even using it yet, and we're starting to see some wear and tear.
Well, you can imagine, staff response when
Right.
we went over and saw that.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just- And you think about, it's just sitting there and you think about service and buses and that load and people,
Well, I hold back as much money as we can.
Yep.
And then no lien releases, no lien waivers should be signed until those two issues are taken up and approved. And if a third party consultant, if a contract attorney needs to get involved, then I think by all means that needs to be considered for us to get the quality of construction that we deserve out there.
We would certainly take a look at that. I appreciate that feedback. You're absolutely right. And I do want to say one last thing too, just to emphasize it. We were very passionate. We've had a series of passionate meetings about how unsatisfied we are. And because we understand that the committee wants to see this move forward. And we're getting the public involved and kind of rimming them up to get excited and trying to over explain ourselves about what's getting ready to happen. Just to show a level of transparency and to have something like this happen is very disappointing. So we do understand the sentiments of the committee.
and also too, with the meetings that we're having, we're going to have weekly updates as far as how they're on each of these items. And we told them, we just don't want, that's done. We need to see more detail and more follow-up than maybe we should have gotten it earlier. I'm not sure, but it's one of those things you learn from. But we told them what the process that we're using on the weekly updates. And especially with the project manager, my expression to him of how they need to hold the contractors accountable. And it's, because I told them we have a huge responsibility here, from how this project is funded, but also how we deliver this product to the public too, and them looking at, what's the final outcome of this project. So that's, hopefully with those follow-up meetings and having, the contractors focused on what they've given us. And I think with the staff that we have now following up, it helps us even, I think, do a better job.
So what I'm hearing, and I'm taking seriously the kinds of specifics that Will is talking about in terms of holding back funds and no liens and the third-party oversight from the insurance.
Quality.
Yeah, on the quality. And so from my perspective, this is feedback from the committee, but I want to be sure that the staff has the authority to do all of these things without committee direction. I mean, I don't see us, for example, I don't see us having a motion or taking a vote on something that's already within the scope of what the.
I think it's all in the contract,
Yeah,
most
yes.
likely. There's always protections
Mhm.
for the comment when working with, infrastructure contractors. So I'm sure it's in there. It's just a matter of, we need to follow through on it to be sure. I'm sure there's language on third-party quality and control as well in there. So that's important that if we need to use it, we need to use it.
And I also, like mentioned with Margaret on staff now, she's been able for us, I think, to dig into these things even more detail based on her experience and projects that she's been involved in. So she's been a great asset to the staff.
Okay, well, I think you can hear how seriously we're taking this as a committee, and I'm hearing both Leroy and Eric saying you're right there in terms of what weight this has for you and for the common itself, so, and for the people that we serve ultimately. So, let me go with a couple of other questions before we, try to look at where we wrap this up. What about the restroom access? Where are we with that issue?
Eric, did you
Oh,
get?
I'm sorry, repeat that question again.
Where are we with the restroom access?
Yes, and actually, Will Brendan, he was able to kind of provide some guidance too on some ideas. So we're still working through that. We are having discussions, and this almost buys us a little bit more time, but we're still being aggressive to get something installed prior to the implementation date. If we're able to get it installed by September, regardless of whether or not we have service at the location, that'll be ideal. So we're trying to work more so with that aggressive window opposed to the January timeframe.
So it really matters to me in terms of what I'm hearing coming out of the committee. It will be a recommendation to the board about changing the implementation date. That would be the action that I'd see the committee taking to delay the implementation date until January. But then I'm thinking about how does the sequence of these things happen? Because we listened to some of the options for restroom access. I know Ms. Herbert talked to us about, and you all looked at some of the things that Columbia is doing and other sites.
Right.
But I'm really feeling uneasy about hurrying up and building something between now and September on ground that we have questions about, that.
We've had that discussion among ourselves too. We really have.
So I guess what my reaction, Eric, is that I think some of these first issues, really, we have to be assured that solid ground is not just a metaphor here. We have to be sure that we are before we do build anything else there. Am I on track?
I completely agree. Pushing it back is probably the best for the whole project. Correct.
All right, so one more thing, and then I'll get to the motion, and that is, when you talked about the beginning feedback from the public, one of the things that I really wanted to hear, what we were hearing from the public, was some of the concerns initially that were expressed about our current riders and their usual trip, and whether there would be delays in their commuting time and longer commuting times. And are you getting feedback from people on that issue? Because it seemed to me that was the potentially most negative impact if we can't assure people that they can actually get to work on time, given the changes in routes. So did you hear from people on that so far, Eric?
Yeah, so in the meeting, people did ask about that question, but we equally had a lot of positive feedback regarding the loop that is being proposed, which bridges that gap. And as of right now, I believe it was a 20-minute frequency to operate with one bus. So in a perfect world, let's just say we had two buses. That's almost like a 10-minute frequency. And that's more of aggressive thinking, especially for the city of Columbia at this point. But for what it's worth, we're not trying to push anything aside. We want to explore all options to see what we can do to bridge that gap, because this may be more efficient than what we have that we've ever had in general. We can just leave it at that. But I think for what it's worth, the loop was resolved most of those issues, and we are using that in phase 3 of the project. But for the time being, with phase 1, we only have a couple of routes. I think maybe it's like 2 to 3 routes that will be utilizing the Lucius Road Super Stop, just to provide that connectivity. So we don't have any, we didn't receive many grievances about what we're trying to do at this point in time. They just want to ensure that that by the time this project is over, there will not be a long waiting period. And I'm working with Al Bolin. He's on the RETP dev side. He's doing the scheduling piece, but I'm working with him to sort through what the service will actually look like, because we actually have to get on the bus and test out the buses. We do have some anticipated times that it would take to get from one point to the next. So we could give you some assumptions, but we want to be able to give to be as exact as possible, that way we minimize any issues from one phase to the next.
Well, and I know, Eric, you'll be building that database from the feedback from all of these public interactions, but I want to take
yeah.
advantage of the moment of having Walter here as our public feedback loop right here in the meeting, and just pause a minute and ask Walter, what are you hearing people say from maybe not just within the meetings that we've been conducting, but generally?
What I'm hearing is phase one is pretty much okay. With the exception of 84, I know there's some issues with that. Getting riders downtown onto Elmwood where there's some workers worried about how they're going to get to work. But other than that, right now, I haven't heard anything of any serious consequence except for Route 84. But I mean, phase one is so inconsequential in my mind.
In terms of the numbers of routes and things that are affected.
Yeah, instead, I mean, phase two and phase three, those are issues that are going to have to be addressed, I think, at that time. But, and like I said in my opening statement, for that driver that I was talking to, she had no idea why there was even a super stop on Lucius. So,
A lot of work to do in that area.
yeah.
Okay, because I'm thinking, I mean, it's a comfort to hear what you're saying in terms of phase one, but phase one, as we know, is a step toward something else. And so any concerns that we have, I just want us to keep the big picture in mind as well as the first step. And thank you for you all, the committee, let me take that little pause out to hear from Walt on that.
Okay, thanks.
Anything
Ms.
else?
Booth, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Gleason.
Okay, on 12, I have not heard anybody complaining about ours. You know, everybody seems to be abreast of it. And if they ask me questions, I try to help them as far as I can. And then I'll tell them if I'm not sure about something, then they can call up there to the office. But everybody seems to be, excited about it.
Okay.
So that's all I've heard so far. And I'm out there on the bus all the time, doctor's appointments,
Well,
stuff like that.
I knew that you had questions as going into this, so I'm glad to get that feedback from you too, Ms. Clayton. Okay, then unless.
Yes, one more question, Madam
Yes,
Chairwoman. So a restroom facility, Eric, Mr. Champs, would be considered a capital improvement project? Would you agree?
I'm
A
sorry.
capital improvement project, a
That is
restroom
correct.
facility out there?
That is correct. Yeah.
Do we have funding lined up if it's considered a capital improvement project? For whatever the final product is?
Michelle is on it.
Yeah, and we have Michelle on the line as well. She can speak more
She
to it.
talked to us last month about the grants and things, so.
Yep.
Let's hear that again. Yeah, or-
Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Currently, there is nothing in any of our existing grants for additional capital needs at that location. I mean, we can always put it in, try to get it through maybe a subsequent year grant and get pre-award authority, but as I said, this was presented as a glorified bus stop, and that's it. So that was all that was programmed into the grant package.
Okay, so it's not in the existing grant. We don't have funding in other grants that could be applied to this.
Correct.
And when you say pre-grant approval to do something, I mean, or are we talking about a year before we could have anything there?
No, we have, some allocations that we could apply for that, facility. I would be hesitant to use pre-award authority. That's when you go ahead and start spending the money because you're pretty sure that you're gonna get the grant dollars, that it's gonna be approved through FTA. With this being an unusual project, I would hesitate to spend the money ahead of getting approval. But it would not necessarily take a year, no.
All right, but there what you see is some possibilities of other ways, and maybe the pushing back the implementation would give us more time
Yeah.
to.
For example, we could take some money that was previously predicted to go towards vehicle replacement. Take some money away from vehicle replacement and put it towards amenities over there.
I guess that was my question, is because it's considered a capital improvement project, does that take any special consideration to come from the general fund, to come from some other funding outlet besides a grant? Penny tax, something outside of the grant process?
You could pay for it with 100% local, which is your penny tax, but I'm not saying that there's a concern with getting the money. We have already been allocated the federal fund. It's just at this point going to FTA and saying, you know, thank you for the money you've allocated to us. This is what we plan to spend it on. We have some out there we can do that with, but we need to get the costs, estimates, and all of that in and put it into an application and get approval. So it could take 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
That could even be.
But what about the money we got? Can we spend the money we got instead of? the
No.
money?
Well, I think what, if
In
I'm
any pool.
understanding is what you're talking about, Michelle, is money that we've already is part of our federal grant funds now.
Correct.
You just have to get approval to spend
Right.
for this.
None of our
particular thing,
existing
but the
grant
money
line
that-
items cover this.
That we already, but it's not.
But yeah, but I'm not saying it can't be grant funded. It's just none of the existing. If you're interested in using grant dollars, I can't answer about if you're using 100% local, you know, if that's money available now or not. I don't
How do we
know.
get clarification on 100% local? If it's a tight timeline and we come to a restroom solution and we need to move now to line up the operation, who can give us the clarification on whether 100% local can be used for a capital improvement project like this?
And I'm probably, Rosalind, I think is probably on the phone too. I think something like this, we would have to take a look at that to see, is it any way available in the budget or just wherever. But I think, again, that's the process we'll flush through the finance committee, you know, which is the normal process, but let them know what type of timeline that we're dealing with.
Well,
So-
is there a way to get a ballpark figure to go ahead and start that research through the finance committee?
Yeah.
To say if there was $250,000 that's needed and it's needed within 4 or 5 months, how can we engage that?
I was going to say that's what we're working on now, just making sure we have all the exact numbers for the various restroom build out that we're considering. And then from there, it should be a fast process, at least to get something into the hands of Michelle and Rosalind to see, okay, what's viable based on our current budget.
So we're starting first with what will the actual cost be, then we go to the staff for what's possible, then we go to the finance committee. And so we have a track to do that. And because I'm thinking, you know, the amount would make a huge difference because I mean, if you get to a certain point, it becomes really important to get that 80-20 match from the federal government, you know, and rather than 100% local funds. It sounds like you have a process that's in place and that you all will be pursuing.
And we'll just take a look at both options, as we work through it.
That's good, that's a good.
And if I could say one further thing, if we, when this goes before the finance committee, we also need to show them the additional cost for maintenance, security, janitorial, all that needs to be factored into that as well. And it was not for the next year's budget originally, I don't believe.
Landscaping, lighting, all that.
Yes, all of that.
All right, so that's.
Yeah, that security of fencing, when we say security, it's not only fencing, but also manpower as far as security
Yeah.
also.
Yeah,
So
the
all
whole,
of that.
the whole package.
Yes.
the whole
Yep.
package. Okay, well, if we've exhausted all the questions, then I would just ask if someone wants to make a motion from the committee that we recommend to the board that we, move the implementation date for the super stop at Lucius Road to January, rather than having it the present September
So
implementation.
moved.
Motion from Mr. Brennan, is there a second?
I second it.
Ms. Gleaton seconds. All right, any further discussion? All right, then we call the roll for,
Mr. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Burgess, Ms. Gleason,
Yes,
Ms. Herbert,
Yes.
Ms. Mood,
yes.
Mr. Racio,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, thank you. And I'll put that, we'll put that in on our agenda for the board meeting so that I'll make that recommendation from the committee. All right. Then that takes us then to the transit operations report, Mr. Cooksey.
Yes, good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing well today. Before I jump into my report, I'd like to just introduce two individuals, and then we'll dive into it. We just recently had our maintenance manager retire, Mr. Ron Sweeney, over 50 years of experience, so we wish him well. But in his stead, Mr. Kevin Mudrick has been promoted to our new maintenance manager. We're excited to have him, and I just wanted to introduce Kevin. If you could just take a quick moment, tell him a little bit about yourself. You've been around for a while, so.
Yeah, I've been here 21 years. Started here as a mechanic, worked my way up to a lead mechanic, then supervisor, and now, of course, maintenance manager. We have a great maintenance team here, and I look forward to leading that and helping it to grow even better.
Thank you so much and congratulations and welcome into that new position. Not a new person at all. That's good news.
Yes, absolutely. And secondly, he's been at a few of our board meetings, so I didn't get a chance to introduce him, but I have a new assistant general manager, ops manager. His name is Mr. Ricky Mack, and Mr. Mack's to my left. He copied me today with shirt and tie. I told him, why are you wearing what I wear? Nevertheless,
I even got a little.
yeah, a little bit going, nothing happened here. I mean, just, to a T. But Mr. Mack, if you can just tell him just a little bit about yourself, and then I'll dive into the report right after that.
Okay, let's see, I retired from the Navy in 2006. Started driving a bus for McDonald Transit, which was shortly bought out by RATP Dev. And I worked my way up the chain of command, just like Kevin did. And my previous property, I was a general manager in Lake County. And RATP Dev asked me to come and join the flagship Comet. And I'm just happy to be here and looking forward to making it a better transit system.
Thank you very much and welcome to you also.
Yeah, so very good. Thank you. So I'm glad to have both of them, and I think we're in good hands. So I'll go ahead and dive into the report. Try not to keep you too long today. I know I can be a little long-winded, some say. So I'll work on that. Looking to my left over here. But as far as COVID, I included just a graph, a chart, no numbers really apply to it, but just kind of give you an idea of where we were really between October of 21 and April of 22, to see where we peaked. Again, just to give you an idea, not impacting us as much today as it was yesterday, as you might say, but again, it is something we have to keep our eye on. The US, we've had 1.1 million confirmed deaths in the United States, since this began. So, and of all of the cases, we've had 103 million confirmed cases of COVID in the United States, which is about 30% of the population, overall, the US population. So it is something we're keeping our eye on as we continue to work through this, but it has not impacted our business at this
And I
time.
would just insert, you know, I'll still watch those weekly figures for South Carolina.
Yeah.
And so we're still pretty much over 1,000 new cases per week in the
Yes.
state
That's correct.
and somewhere around 10 deaths per week. So, I mean, you're right. This is something that we are living with and we want to keep living with it.
Very good. So we obviously watch that closely. Jumping into customer service, actually, we've had some pretty strong months as far as our customer service complaints in reference to just a number of complaints. I think we're doing a really good job in that area. You know, it fluctuates month to month from, you know, the safety category and the reliability category, or, you know, you see that go up and down. It just depends on the month and what's happening. But overall, the numbers are good in those areas. In fact, what I did this time too, because I know there's been time to time, bus stop cleanliness comes up and how important that is. So what I did was I included just a little bit of data, some stats around that on my bus stop cleanliness slide, just to kind of give you a trend of how many complaints that we received, at least through January, and how many of those are bus stop complaints. It's very low. And, you know, we do know that there's several ways to get a compliment or a complaint through our social media, you know, through people calling the number, you know, even board members, members of the community. You know, there's so many ways that those things can come through. And, you know, of course, obviously, you know, as soon as we get something, we're on top of it. But one, you can just see the trend of you know, of overall as far as our bus stop cleanliness or complaints in general. You know, in January, starting at 48, we're down to 32. You see us trending down. So I think we're doing well there. But what we have heard in May, where we have 3 more so, and I think it's come up previously, you know, the homeless at the shelters, you know, they're drinking or smoking or, you know, just kind of,
But not waiting for a bus.
not waiting for a bus. And you see that, you know, just in transit in general, right? But you know, in the summer months, you tend to have you know, an uptick in that. So we've seen that. So, you know, that we're just monitoring what that looks like as we kind of get through these months.
Okay, so I had one thought about, and I know I'm looking at the reliability complaints and always connect that on time
Sure.
performance, you know, that have
Yeah.
those things fit together. And one of the questions I had, and I may have asked this before, so forgive me if I have. But one of the things is I know that we have schedules at every stop. And now that we've made the changes in times and in schedules, I'm just wondering how, if we assure that every one of those bus stops has the accurate schedule for now, because what I would expect is if I come to a stop and I read what's posted at the stop, and that's what I'm judging
Right.
whether the bus is reliable on. And if it's off a little bit because just that posting is not accurate for the latest scheduling, that might lead to reliability complaints. That's my process of thinking. So really the question is, are we up to date? Are each one of the bus stops, do they have an up-to-date schedule?
Yeah, you know, we would like to you know, with the new technology nowadays, and you know, the advancement of using the different apps, the website, that would be your dominant way to, it's so much more so than a schedule where you would hopefully you get to see the reliability issues go down because you can actually track the bus. So instead of it saying, you know, the bus is at a certain location at say 6 p.m., okay, it might be running, say 4 or 5 minutes behind, but you're able to track it. So therefore, you know, your view of it being reliable shouldn't go down because you can actually see, you know, it's going to be here within the time frame. I think that's a work in progress. That's what part of the on-time performance project was, really breaking down all of the technical challenges, and there's still some that still need to be worked out. And in reference to all of the data or the software behind, calculating everything and making sure that, right, the actual times that are created and built out match what you see the customer sees. So we know that we're still working through some minor things here and there with the different parties that are involved with that. And that's ongoing. That's why we have never stopped
Right.
and continuing to work.
Well,
with
and,
that.
and I hear you saying that your expectation is that most of our customers are using the technology and to assess, and the fact that if I'm low tech and don't have access to that the posted schedule, the variation in the arrival time is going to be so small, different, that it wouldn't be enough to generate a complaint. But
Well,
I just don't want us to have anything out there that misleads the public at all.
Yeah, I don't feel that we're misleading them to that degree. On the reliability issue, we can dig down because there's several categories within the reliability that, that I can
And I
break
know it's
down.
talking small numbers, but I just want to be sure that's in the pot, but to be
Sure.
monitored and followed up.
Eric has his hand up.
Eric.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna piggyback on what Lenny was mentioning. So it is more of a collaborative effort. And so I kind of wanted to give him a little support there. So for what it's worth, we do take a look in between each service change to see if there are any updates that are needed to make it more reliable. As of today, this is probably the most efficient schedule that we probably had thus far. I think Lenny, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we hugging that on-time performance around 80%, more or less on some days. But for what it's worth, we do feel like we have a lot of trust in what we have out there. And Pam has done a great job of creating some books for us that we're going to have out. And so we're trying to be more diligent in our practices than what we've done in the past, and how we display the information and also how we evaluate it in between each service period. We do have a software, it's called Swiftly. And that Swiftly software, it does tell you the variation between 1 minute to 2 minutes from every single stop within the system. So if we consistently are 1 minute behind, then they will recommend that we make that adjustment for that timing point to be 1 minute, ahead. So and Lenny did kind of mention that as well. So these are some of the steps that we're taking, but we're working with them very closely just to make sure we can rectify many of those issues. But I think we are on the right track.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
I want to piggyback on that too, Eric. I have noticed when the buses get downtown, everybody's really trying to make that connection. And once a lot of those drivers, they load up, they move on. You know what I'm saying? So they really try to, they have done, from what I have seen when I'm downtown for doctor's appointments or something, they have really been on time. And I like to give people credit where credit is due. And they really do try to make those connections down at those bus drivers and changing when bus drivers change, they really do try to have that right on target. So they're doing a wonderful job for what I have seen. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Lee. I'll turn it back over to Mr.
Okay.
Cooksey.
No problem. So that's something like, again, we're constantly monitoring and looking at that as far as the reliability issues. And then, from time to time, again, I'll be bringing up bus stop cleanliness and things of those nature that we kind of dig into, kind of talk through, make sure we're on track. Going to employee recognition, we have two individuals, Mr. Jeremiah Waller for on our fixture outside. He's recently and his wife had a baby. He primarily works out at USC as far as a supervisor there. So has a bright future, very bright, smart young man. So again, we want to recognize him for being Employee of the Month. And also for DART, TCS, Cindy Williams. It's our Employee of the Quarter there. So she primarily handles an administrative role for them. And I know she loves arts and crafts, so she's pretty handy with making stuff. So making some nice stuff. So again, want to congratulate Cindy for being Employee of the Quarter. Also, just to let you know, we are prepping ourselves for the hurricane readiness. Season has started already. Thankfully, we have nothing here. I know we had stuff last year that came through and kind of went through our process there. But I did give you a list of the names. I don't see anybody's name on there for this particular season. The great thing for the Comet is Mr. Mack and Mr. Dennis, myself, are all from Florida. And we've done numerous hurricanes, from Hurricane 5 down to 1. So we like to think this is our strength, right? So we're all here, and whomever else has been through that. But I just want to let you know, I think Mr. Mack will be running an exercise sometime here in the next week or two, just to kind of get us prepared for that. So we're all on the same page in the event we have something that comes through. From a maintenance standpoint, even Mr. Bundrick has taken over, but they continuing rolling on 100% in reference to our PMs, preventive maintenance. And also, we did exceed our goal for miles between road calls. So good work by Mr. Bundrick and his team, keeping us on point. A lot of pressure there. Ron didn't miss anything. So, all right. With your help. As far as our on-time performance, pretty much flat for this month compared to the last 2 months. Looks like we've kind of, with a better word, kind of settled in on this number. We had some impact in March and April that kind of kept us at that number. We did have a major service change in May, so you get new drivers on new routes. So that may also have impacted the reliability of touch this move, because you have different people doing different things for the month that they actually picked. But nevertheless, that's something, you know, talking with Eric, that we're constantly working on and we meet about on a regular basis. So as far as DART, saw an increase in their area, so they consistently do a good job of meeting their or exceeding their goal in those areas. Ridership, if we compare to last year, we see a 7.9% increase compared to May of 2022. So if you look at our previous month comparison, we did have a decrease of 11.18%, and that primarily because the summer session of USC kicked in, and that was our impact on those numbers. So, but what I can say, if we look at our average daily ridership, if we look at 22 versus 23, we've beaten every month from January through current. So we do see the direction moving forward compared to the last couple of years as far as our ridership and the direction that it's moving in. So, quick slide on Gamecock ridership. Obviously, summer coming in, we see the big dip there. It's consistent with every summer ridership.
Yes, while we're on that slide, can I ask you a question? So the university's switching over to a remote parking approach, and which hopefully pushes cars out of Campus Central. Are y'all working with them on the delivery or the new schedule for that? Any new routes that are being planned?
I'm glad you asked, Mr. Eric. I saw you pop off.
That Campus Village is 2 blocks from me, and I hear about it all the time. So.
Hey, one thing about it, Will Brennan is standing a no. But yes, so we are working with them. We presented the proposed rerouting of 2 of their routes. Well, actually it was like 4 recommendations, but we settled at Route 20 being adjusted to accommodate the parking being isolated on the campus, because there's no direct dedicated parking for the new facility. But what we're going to do, and we're building out the schedule now as we speak, but we're going to, there'll be 2 patterns for Route 20 for USC Transit. We have the regular pattern, which operates today, but by 5 p.m., which is when the Route 14 no longer is in service, we will extend just portions of Route 20 to be able to serve that corridor of where the new dormitory would be located, and also where the parking, the nearest parking would be accessible. Now, it would still be it would be a process, because in order to access your car, you go from one side of
there's
the
flexibility.
campus.
Okay, so there's flexibility. Yeah. So if a student wants to get from the new Campus Village to, let's say, the Colonial Center, to that parking over there, there's a way for them to get there, whether it's 2 routes, 1 or whatever.
That is correct.
Okay, so is there an agreement between USC and the Comet to continue to look at it as we get up and running? Because I think this is new territory for all of us, about what the impacts are going to be, not only for that area, but actually all the surrounding neighborhoods.
Yep, absolutely. So there will be some service monitoring in between. So September would be the implementation date for the service. We will start a little earlier, and we're working with RTP Dev for that, and that'll be around like towards the end of August, the start of the school year, essentially. But by January, we'll be able to see what did not go well for the first semester and try to make those improvements by that time.
Okay, thanks so much, y'all.
Thank you.
So what I'm thinking is, Will, if this new facility is within 2 blocks of you, that means you have a bus ride from.
Absolutely, that gets my 5 points.
There you go. Because those buses are, I mean, they're part of our
Grab my
total
Starbucks
system.
and get on the Comet.
Can't beat that. That's good stuff.
Get on Soda Cap, go right down Main Street to City Hall.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as on the safety side of the house, then we discussed a little bit about ridership and what that looks like. We've actually had a decrease in preventable accidents year over year. So we're seeing some improvements there. We have had an uptick in our injury frequency rate, and that's something we're working on inside, which is our slip, trips, and falls, right? That's always something you have to work on. So that's an area promotion or program that we're kind of build to help us internally in those areas. Our last safety meeting, however, we did have a chance to focus on wheelchair securement and things of that nature, which went over very well. So we showed some impactful video there and had an opportunity to discuss securing wheelchairs on a variety of different situations and scenarios. As far as our human resources, we're in good shape. As far as our head count and our staffing, we are staffed. We currently have a waiting list of individuals that would want to come and work here. That's something that not everyone can say, but we can say that here. So we're very excited about that. We're also this Friday planning our big Juneteenth cookout for our staff and Father's Day combo. So we're looking forward to putting all that stuff together. So if you're in and around the area, feel free to swing by for a hot dog, hamburger, or some chicken or something to that effect. As far as our KPIs for the month, I mean, we exceeded our needless road calls, customer service complaints, preventable accidents. And so we're pretty much on track. We exceeded our goal for the payroll, GP, and flat for fixed route. And that concludes my report. I have no for any questions. Thank you.
I have a question.
All right, Ms. Clayton, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to thank the staff for the Comet Route Guide book. I picked up one and I put it in my purse. That is really, they did a beautiful job on that and doing that, because that really helps people with all the routes, and they are all listed in there and the addresses. So I encourage people when I see them on the bus, they asking the bus driver a lot of questions. Get you one of those books and keep it, because they really have a lot of good information on that. That's my word.
Good feedback, good feedback. All right, any other questions for Mr. Cooksey? Then, Eric, you want to talk to us about your ridership analysis?
Actually, and so this month we actually don't have the ridership report inside of the packet, and we are working through some of those changes. We'll be working with Mr. Mack, who's a new addition of RATP Dev, to start generating those reports for us. But we don't have a report for this particular month, but we will update the committee with all the needed details for in July.
Okay. All right, well, that's the last item on our agenda then is a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion we adjourn.
All right, have a motion and a second, and we can just take a raise your hand vote. Aye. And opposed?
Aye.
Adjourned.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clayton.